Hey, what's up? And welcome to the Poison Tea Party podcast. We're so glad to be back together again, just sitting around sipping poisons from our teacups and bringing you some of history's most amazing gossip that you may or may not have heard of before.
Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?
I don't know. We're going to find out today,
Probably
though.
not.
I'm your host, Janet. To my left is the lady who invented the fucking coochie board, my sissy, Trass.
That's right.
And to my right, a young lady you never want to talk politics with, or she'll probably hurt your feelings. My daughter, Kaylee. Bitch.
I was like, is she
Let me
going to
just-
say anything?
I know, she was like,
She's sipping her poison.
The
we don't know
poison.
what's going on here. We don't know. We are all here coming at you from the secret underground lair somewhere in the north. Let's get down to it. We have an awesome show for you tonight. We're already most of the way through February, and it's been the longest year ever so far.
Yeah.
Has it or not?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yes.
God, I'm like, what the fuck is it like? I feel like it's April.
For real.
Like it's been months.
It needs to be over.
Right, but can it just be over?
At least the winter
Put me
part
out of my
it.
misery.
For real.
The world's changing around us at a rapid pace, but tonight, as we always do here at the Poison Tea Party, I wanted to focus on the past.
Dun,
Oh my god.
Oh my God. I was
That's
waiting for
right.
Trask to do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Oh my god.
George Santayana, a Spanish-American philosopher and novelist, said it best, and perhaps most famously when he said, "Those who do not remember their past are condemned to repeat it."
Preach, sister.
Tonight, in honor of February, the month known for love and Black history, we're going to switch things up a little bit from our normal doom and gloom.
All right. I'm here for it.
It's going to be a little different. You ready?
I'm
I don't know.
strap in.
I don't know. Strap on. We're going to say it forever. I'm sorry.
It's
5 buckles. Extra protection.
That's fucked up.
Super strength.
Well, don't worry. Don't worry, everyone. There's going to be plenty of uncomfortableness.
Oh yeah,
I assure you.
We got that covered.
Damn
But
it.
I wanted to take this opportunity to celebrate Black history and remember our past. I want to showcase where we've come from before we fall back into time and repeat our own horrible history.
Period.
The tale I'm going to tell you tonight is extraordinary. We're just jumping into it. I have nothing.
All right.
I have no pregame.
I'm here for it.
This is a big deal.
Raw.
Okay. Raw.
What
Raw.
did you say?
The tale I'm going to tell you tonight is extraordinary. I'm not sure if you know this story, but when I heard it, I was like, what the fuck?
Maybe I have.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't, but it is one of the most unbelievable stories to come out of the antebellum South. This is a love story
Okay.
that we're telling here in the Poison Tea Party tonight.
Oh my god.
And it's a powerful account of what two people in love would go through to be together and be free.
Okay.
Aw. Is it gonna make us like sad?
I don't know. It might make you pissed off.
It's definitely going to make Kaylee pissed off.
Yeah.
Let's be
Well, yeah.
honest.
This is the incredible story of William and Ellen Craft.
I've heard
Sounds
this
familiar,
before,
but I'm
maybe.
not entirely sure.
You
Yeah.
maybe heard about it at school during like Black history when you were learning about that slavery and stuff like that. They're not the ones that they always talk about. They always talk about Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King and
Rosa Parks.
Sojourner Truth and people like that. You know who they are, but you don't maybe necessarily know the story, and it's pretty fucking incredible. So,
Well, let's fucking hear it.
Yeah.
but before,
God
of course,
damn it.
and just so we can really appreciate William and Ellen Craft's story, we're going to brush up on our pre-Civil War American history a little bit with a quick rundown on slavery in America. So pay attention, class. The institution of slavery in the South traces roots clear back to the early 17th century when the first enslaved Africans were brought to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. This marked the beginning of the system that would expand and evolve over the next 2 centuries. Initially, the labor needs of the colonies were met by indentured servants, but as the demand for labor grew, especially in agriculture, the colonies turned to African slavery as a more permanent and controllable source of labor. Enslaved Africans were forcibly brought to the South via the transatlantic slave trade.
If you haven't heard about it, then fucking figure it out.
Yeah.
Ships transported them under brutal and inhumane conditions across the Atlantic Ocean. The Middle Passage, as this journey was known, saw many captives suffer and die from disease, malnutrition, and abuse before even reaching American shores.
Yep.
And if you want to know more about that, just look that up. But it's going to turn your stomach.
I mean, just think
It's
about
awful.
a ton of people
Shoved.
crowded, shoved, pissing, shitting.
And really, even if you do know about
puking,
it,
dying,
look it up anyways,
all in a
because I
tiny
guarantee you
area.
what you learned in school is not even covering a
No.
portion of what actually fucking
It was
happened.
a very G-rated.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you learn about that shit, you're in like what, 4th, 5th grade?
Yeah, and
No,
they don't tell you
That's
most
not
of
even
the stuff.
That's
Yeah.
not even a portion of what actually fucking happened.
And you're not going to be learning about that shit much longer, probably.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's why we're doing this tonight.
I'm already fucking mad, and I haven't even heard anything yet. I'm already-
So eventually, the South would develop what was referred to as a plantation economy. After the international slave trade was banned in 1808, the domestic slave trade became more prominent. Enslaved people were often sold at auctions and transported from the upper South to the lower South to meet the labor demands of expanding plantations, especially in the Cotton Belt. Plantations were large agricultural estates that depended almost entirely on the labor of enslaved people. These plantations operated self-sufficiently, with enslaved people performing not only agricultural work, but also skilled trades and domestic duties.
I was gonna say almost all. I'm pretty
Pretty much
sure
all.
that they did it all.
Yeah. The harsh conditions on these plantations, combined with the constant threat of violence, created an environment of intense suffering and dehumanization for the enslaved population. The living conditions for enslaved people were generally harsh and inhumane. They lived in basic, often overcrowded cabins with minimal furnishings. Their diet was usually insufficient and lacked variety, contributing to malnutrition and poor health. Enslaved individuals worked long hours, typically from dawn until dusk, under the constant threat of physical punishment. Slave laws included provisions that denied enslaved people basic human rights, such as the right to marry, own property, or receive an education. Enslaved people were considered property, and their status was hereditary. It was passed down from mother to child. The social order in the South was heavily influenced by the institution of slavery. The order was white, large plantation owners at the top, followed by small white farmers, then poor whites, and at the bottom, enslaved people. This hierarchy was maintained through a combination of legal restrictions, social customs, and violence. The fear of slave uprisings and the need to control the enslaved population led to the establishment of patrols and militias, further cementing the system of racial oppression. Despite all this, though, enslaved people resisted their bondage in various ways. And good for fucking them.
Go you.
Acts of resistance ranged from subtle forms of defiance, such as work slowdowns and sabotage of equipment, to more overt actions, including runaways and organizing revolts. There were even slave rebellions, though ultimately unsuccessful. They demonstrated the desire for freedom and the lengths that which enslaved people would go through to achieve it.
And hey, we're actually fucking people. We're not
animals.
Right.
We're not fucking cattle. And even animals shouldn't be treated the way they were.
No.
It's
But
crazy.
They were real fucking people.
Yeah. The abolitionist movement gained momentum in the early 19th century, driven by moral, religious, and economic arguments against slavery. Abolitionists, both black and white, worked tirelessly to end slavery through various means.
Kaylee's stewing over
Keely's
there.
over there pissed off. She was just pissed when I said the word slavery. That just went,
I was just like, continue.
I'm sick of you already. Abolitionists, both black and white, worked tirelessly to end slavery through various means, including writing, public speaking, organizing societies, and assisting enslaved people to escape via the Underground Railroad. Prominent abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, William Lloyd Garrison, and Sojourner Truth played critical roles in raising awareness and motivating public opinion against slavery. And eventually, the issue of slavery became increasingly divisive in the United States, leading to political tension and conflicts. The Missouri Compromise in 1820 and the Compromise of 1850 were attempts to balance the interest of slavery in free states, but ultimately proved to be temporary solutions. Then, in 1860, with the election of President Abraham Lincoln, who was deeply opposed...
16th president.
He was deeply opposed to the institution of slavery. The South believed their way of life and economic interests were under threat. 11 Southern states seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. The war began fundamentally about the preservation of the Union, but the issue of slavery quickly became central. In 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory to be free. While the proclamation did not immediately free all enslaved people, it changed the nature of the war and made abolition a key goal of the Union effort. The war ended in 1865 with the defeat of the Confederacy.
Yeah, go fuck yourselves.
Yeah.
Yep.
See ya.
But it wasn't really the end.
Unfortunately. The 13th Amendment was added to the U.S. Constitution in December of 1865. It formally abolished slavery in the United States. Though slavery had been abolished, it brought about many challenges to American society. The period following the Civil War is known as Reconstruction. The federal government put in place policies aimed at rebuilding the South and integrating formerly enslaved people into American society. The Freedmen's Bureau was established to provide assistance, including education, healthcare, and legal support to newly freed African Americans. But Reconstruction faced considerable resistance from white Southerners who wanted to maintain their racial hierarchy. Black codes and later Jim Crow laws were enacted to restrict the rights and freedoms of African Americans, ensuring their continued oppression. Organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan used terror and violence to intimidate and suppress black citizens, and we've talked about them before, mainly on Lake Lanier. Mm-hmm. If you guys listen to that episode, it's one of our most popular.
We talked about them at the Death Tree, too.
Yep, the Death Tree. They've come up pretty much
several times.
This is it's a big deal to us at this table anyway.
It definitely is, and also it's so funny because it's like you hear 1860 and everyone thinks, oh,
that was so long ago. It has nothing to do with us.
It really wasn't that long ago.
No.
At all. And actually, a fun fact, since we're on the topic of Black History Month, one of the first girls who attended an all-white school just turned 60 this year. So that should tell you how not long ago it was.
Yeah.
And that's sad and unfortunate, and it's happening all over again.
Yeah.
And this isn't about politics. This is about basic civil human rights.
No, we're not getting into politics, but it is something that is important that if we have a platform, we should say something.
Definitely.
And we have a tiny platform, but we do have one, so we're using it.
But I still got one, god damn it.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
I'd stand on a soapbox.
Kaylee stands on hers all the time.
She does.
With my fucking Boone's Farm.
And we're all listening. The end of Reconstruction in 1877, marked by the withdrawal of the federal troops from the South, led to the resurgence of white supremacy and the establishment of segregationalist policies. The promise of equality and integration remained unfulfilled for many African Americans who continued to face systemic discrimination and disenfranchisement. The legacy of slavery in the South is profound and enduring. The economic and social systems established during the slavery era had long-lasting effects on American society. The racial hierarchy and discriminatory practices continued to shape the lives of African Americans well into the 20th century and beyond. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s sought to address the inequalities and injustices that were the legacy of slavery and segregation. Landmark legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, aimed to dismantle legal segregation and protect the rights of African Americans. Despite these advancements, the struggle for racial equality and justice continues to this day.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And so does slavery. Hello, huge sex trade slavery going on here in America and across the world.
Oh, but we don't want to talk about that. That's not really happening, Kaylee.
Oh, but it is.
And it was kind of the same thing, with this. The cultural impact of slavery is also significant. African Americans developed a rich cultural heritage that blended African traditions with elements of American culture. This heritage is evident in music, art, literature, and religion, contributing to the broader tapestry of American culture. The resilience, creativity, and strength of enslaved people and their descendants have left an indelible mark on this nation.
Fucking right.
So that, I know that was really dry and boring, maybe.
I mean,
it's not dry and it's not
it's
boring.
All stuff you knew, but I
Yeah.
wanted to refresh you because
and maybe it's not things that people know.
maybe it isn't.
no. And if
Because-
you've never been to like a Baptist church, I totally recommend that you go. Me and my sister went once.
That was the most, I talk about it all the time.
I know. It's one of my favorite memories from when we were little.
Me too. If I'm ever going to go to a church, it's going to be a black church.
Absolutely.
Those people, I don't even believe in that kind of shit, but I did that day.
I did too.
I'm telling you.
I felt it.
I did.
I felt it. It was fucking amazing.
The energy.
And we were so little.
Like, yeah, we were the only white people there. Well,
and it was fine though.
Yeah,
but it was still,
they didn't act like we were.
We were not an inconvenience.
We didn't even know that we were. I mean, I kind of did because I was like, oh my God, I'm the only white person.
You were a little older than me. I literally was like.
But they didn't act like we were white and weird.
I mean, I feel like that's so important for every white person to experience.
Yeah.
Anyways, though, like having to be the minority. Because when I went to Mexico, it was a complete cultural shock. I wasn't going to tourist places or anything like that. I was going to
just
places
regular old
where my best friend's grandma lived in Mexico.
Yeah.
These were just towns in Mexico.
And it was all Latino.
And yes, and I was the only white person. I stood out like a sore thumb.
Right.
And everyone was staring at me.
Right.
And then that puts it into perspective.
That's what it's like.
To realize,
sometimes you got to be uncomfy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was...
to learn a few things.
Yeah. After I had that experience, I was like, that's what's lacking.
Right.
They don't have the chance.
Understand
well, and you just think about it, like your level of uncomfortable is fucking nothing.
No,
compared to...
It's nothing, but white people need to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
That's what they need.
Fucking right.
It's the only way that they get an ounce of
what it might be like to be a minority.
Yeah.
And even then, this is not going to ever understand.
So. It doesn't take away the fact that we're not still aware of the privilege that we have in this country.
Yeah.
But it does give you more perspective and empathy, and it gives you a better understanding for every group in America and across the world.
So after all that was the history. So now we're going to talk about what it was really like to be a slave. We talked about the history of it and how slavery came about and the economical part of it. But let's talk about what it was really like.
Lay it on me, sister.
Okay, This is really...
I already know. I already know that I'm going to be upsetty spaghetti.
Terrible.
And you know what? Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's get uncomfy, guys. Well, in a word, it was absolutely fucking terrible. In several words, sorry, which we know. But the living conditions were atrocious. Plantation slave homes were generally poorly constructed one-room shacks made of wood logs or planks. Slave homes were often built in different parts of the plantation property away from the main residence. Because of this poor construction, the shacks were poorly heated, and slaves often struggled on very cold nights. While some plantations were small and housed only a few slaves, there were others that were substantially larger that housed hundreds of slaves. Large plantations often retained what was referred to as house slaves. These were mostly women who resided in separate quarters either in the main house or small separate homes just outside the main residence. Because of this, these slaves usually had access to more comfortable living conditions as far as heat and cleanliness goes. So,
well, they need to be available for their master at all fucking times.
Right.
So.
And it was more, I don't want to say prominent.
It was
in the
more
slave,
coveted as,
that's what they wanted to be because they could be warm.
Right.
Isn't that so sad?
Right. And they might get table scraps or something different than whatever they were given.
Right, because they had more one-on-one
FaceTime.
interaction with the master or the owner or whatever the fuck. A first-hand account of Frederick Douglass, a former slave and later leader of the abolitionist movement, from his book Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. He wrote, quote, I suffered much from hunger, but much more from cold. In hottest summer and coldest winter, I was kept almost naked, no shoes, no stockings, no jacket, no trousers, nothing on but a coarse tow linen shirt reaching only to my knees. I had no bed. I must have perished with cold, but that the coldest nights I used to steal a bag, which was used for carrying corn to the mill. I would crawl into this bag. There I would sleep, on the cold, damp clay floor, with my head in and my feet out. My feet have been so cracked with frost that the pen with which I am writing might be laid in the gashes.
Wasn't Frederick Douglass, wasn't he, didn't he get into politics later on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
He did.
Because he was one of my, when I did my Black History Month stuff at work, he was one that I did it on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a miracle he survived.
Yeah. It really
Strong.
fucking is.
Gotta be fucking strong to get through that shit. I can't even fucking imagine.
So daily life for slaves in the United States consisted of several main topics, including working conditions, clothing, food, and education. As we discussed, most slaves worked in agricultural positions on plantations, and this was very labor-intensive work, of course. Slaves worked from dawn till dusk, on average about 16 hours a day in difficult conditions. Heat, cold, rain, snow. They worked outdoors in all weather every day from sun up to sundown.
And if you can think, like, in the summertime, it was definitely more than that because the sun doesn't go down until, like, 9, 10
Sometimes,
o'clock.
yeah.
House slaves, while safe from the elements, endured long hours maintaining the main residence. They were tasked with cooking, cleaning, and assisting in raising the plantation owners' children. Slaves were given one, sometimes, if they were lucky, 2 changes of clothes, and they were required to wear them. Men and boys were given poor-fitted shirts and breeches, as they were called, pants.
Breeches.
Breeches.
Yeah, breeches.
Breeches is what they call.
Yeah.
While women were given dresses, all made of itchy, uncomfortable fabrics like fucking burlap.
I was gonna say burlap is the
It's
the
just
main
like
one
your
that comes-
cheapest.
Well, yeah, because it's like what the
material.
animal feed came in. So
Yeah,
like
so they'd
they're-
make clothes out of that shit.
yeah, because they were
'cause-
resourceful.
Well,
And-
they didn't make it. The fucking masters had
Well-
it made. And then, they might have
They
the
probably
slaves make
yeah.
clothes for other slaves out of the old feed bags.
Oh, look, here's a feed bag. Go
Yeah.
make yourself a fucking shirt,
It's,
dickhead.
ugh,
Hate your face.
ridiculous. These clothes became more uncomfortable the dirtier they became. Because they were only provided with 1 or 2 pairs of clothes and almost no time or resources to even fucking wash them, slaves wore the same outfit day in, day out after a hard, sweaty work in the fields. This, as you can imagine, led to unsanitary and unsavory living conditions.
Yep.
Some plantation owners provided 1 pair of shoes for their slaves, while others opted not to provide footwear at all, as the hard work of farming would wear them out too fast and they found it an unnecessary expense. As a result, many slaves lived their lives completely barefoot.
Ridiculous.
Which,
In the fields, can you imagine? Like,
No,
have you ever
there's
stepped on
rock-
Have you ever stepped on a corn cob, like a dried fucking corn?
Yeah,
husk
they're
cob?
awful.
It fucking hurts.
have you ever ran through a tilled
Yes,
field?
it does not feel good.
No,
it's not
it's
pleasant.
not awesome. Like when
not.
it's freshly tilled, it's different. But after that
Even
sits there
then,
for like 1 day, the
It's like
shit gets
all the
hardened from the
rocks and-
sun.
ooh, yeah. Mm-mm.
Ugh, it hurts.
Snow.
Yeah, it's freezing. Like, what the fuck? The food and diets of the slaves varied from plantation to plantation. Historians note that the most likely common diet for a slave consisted of pork, rice, and corn. While this diet provided sustenance, it denied them of a variety of nutrients. Slaves regularly suffered from nutrient deficiencies that made them prone to certain illnesses. Another passage from Frederick Douglass's book remarks, quote, "Our food was coarse cornmeal boiled. This was called mush. It was put into a large wooden tray or trough and set up down upon the ground in front of us. The children were then called like so many pigs, and like so many pigs, they would come over and devour the mush."
Poor babies.
So when they say pork, rice, and corn, I go, oh, that doesn't sound that bad. But then let me tell you, this is not corn on the cob.
Well, and
This
it's
isn't
not
the
like
fun
a-
shit with butter and
a
salt.
leg of fucking, ham
Yeah.
leg or something.
It's
No,
not a
like
pork
the-
chop. It's like
No.
the
Think
fucking
of, like, old
nastiest
people
parts.
food.
Yeah.
That's
Like
what it is. Like
the guts and the fucking whatever
Yeah.
of the pig that they didn't want, they gave to them. Like,
Yeah.
all
you
thrown
know.
together.
Yeah.
It's fucking gross, man. Another aspect of slavery life was education, or lack
Lack
thereof.
I was gonna say what?
In general, most slave owners did not educate their slaves. Slaves were looked at as inferior and barely even human. Some owners believed that they were incapable of even learning, while others, concerned about the possibility of a slave rebellion, did not want to help educate them for fear that they might rise up. Mm-hmm. There were a few slaves who did learn, though, through more lenient slave owners or by teaching themselves. Occasionally, they would pass the knowledge along to other slaves, though punishment for doing so could be whipping or death. Mm-hmm. Another constant in the daily life of a plantation slave was enforcement of slave codes. Slave codes were laws that were set out like rules for slaves in the United States. For example, one very strict code said that no slave was allowed to leave slave owners' property without a white person. Slave codes had harsh punishments for those who tried to escape, such as whippings, brandings, and even death. Slave punishment and abuse is well documented through official written records, first-hand accounts, and photographs. Slaves were regularly subjected to beatings, whippings, and other forms of torture as a way to maintain order and authority.
Stupid fucking shit.
Which we all knew that, but...
Yeah, but it's still fucking
It's
dumb
just-
as fuck. An actual, living, breathing, human fucking being.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because why? Because
It's not... And even, okay, whatever. Some people are beating their fucking dogs and whatever. I don't fucking like that shit either. But, you know, it's a fucking human. Like
It's
an
a
actual person. Like
but they didn't see them as that, and I don't even know how that is.
And they can, you know, just imagine looking into somebody's fucking eyes, especially like a child.
Yeah.
And you're fucking beating them, and they're just, I can't even fucking think about it because it just fucking pisses me off.
It just makes me so fucking mad.
Because they have feelings, and they can express those feelings, and they have, not that, you know, animals don't, because they do too. But this is a whole different level.
They were viewed as property, and they were not human. I can't grasp how that is a possible thing.
No, I don't give a fuck.
Because I would have been the slave owner that was buying as many slaves as I could.
would have too.
And then you're just going to come live with me.
I'm going to have a school.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to teach you, and we're going to we got to keep it hush-hush, though. You got to be
Yeah,
able
we
to put
can't
that
talk
shit
about it.
away when people come over.
Yeah. No, the whole thing doesn't make any fucking sense because
Because they wanted cheap labor. So pay them. So why can't they?
No, because they wanted it to be free. They wanted free labor,
Yeah.
and they also wanted.
Well, I paid for that.
Yeah.
I paid for him. I paid for him one time.
I just think the whole thing is ironic because it is literally just the definition of when greedy white men get a ego and
because
a power.
everything belonged to them.
Fucking
I am God. I am
literally.
fucking...
Well, I don't see how this country was founded with the idea of freedom, and then they do this.
Right.
I
Makes no
don't
fucking
understand how
they
were like, yeah,
continue.
that should be okay to do that.
This continues throughout history over and over and over again through different
it's not
things.
just with African slaves. There's
No.
slaves all around the world. And
Yeah, and this country is based on freedom and this life of just, oh, we're fighting for our freedom constantly. America's the greatest. But what is so great about this place if this is the shit that's happening here? And it's like,
Well, we left Europe to get out from underneath
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
fucking English
we
British
knew
rule, right?
what
and
it
then
was
we came
like
here.
to be suppressed.
Yeah.
And we go and do it to people who weren't even here.
But we do it harder than they did.
Way worse.
Yeah, no shit. No shit.
So-
All
fucking
based on the
stupid.
color of their skin.
Correct.
Come up with slurs that haunt them to this day.
And they spoke a different language, obviously, when they came over.
I mean,
So, you know, it was just like...
it baffles me because these people, there were some slaves who would tally the wall just so they could remember when their birthday was.
There was a lot that lost their names when they came.
Because it was beat out of them.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. And it was all because if you give someone an ounce of fucking power, they fucking run with it.
Yeah.
And it's like Jimi Hendrix. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the
Yeah.
world will know freedom. That's the issue.
That's the deep shit right there.
She's on her soapbox.
She's getting worked up.
we haven't even gotten to the fucking story.
At these are times when I wish we did have video because Kaylee's over there waving her fucking. She's a preacher, man.
She is a preacher. She should have been a politician. So
They would have canceled me because I'm a woman who's getting drunk. They'd been like, Kaylee spotted alone drunk on a Tuesday?
speaking her mind.
How is she allowed in
She's a witch.
politics?
She's a witch burner.
Burn her!
So the abuse was carried out by the overseer on these plantations. The overseer was basically a supervisor put in place to keep watch and control the slaves as they worked. For example, a slave would most likely be beaten for working too slowly or stealing food or trying to escape.
I bet he had a small dick too.
He did. I seen it.
Fucking loser.
Sorry. That was probably more than I needed to go.
Nope, was
it
definitely
wasn't.
true.
We've all seen the awful photograph of the former slave named Gordon, or Whipped Peter. Do you guys know the picture I'm talking about? It shows an African American man's back with brutal, brutal scarring from multiple whippings he endured from his plantation owners and overseers. And he escaped from that plantation in Louisiana.
Thank God.
Fucking right, he did.
We're just going to take a break.
Woman of
Good, because I need
silence.
some ice in it.
We're going to take a tea break.
This is a good idea.
I'm on like glass 3 or 4. Janet's on like dose.
With all the horrors endured by the enslaved, perhaps none were as violating or as dehumanizing as the sexual abuse that took place.
I don't even know.
I just talk about it briefly. It's not.
I was gonna say I
Because
don't go
this
into
shit
it.
pisses me off.
During the years of slavery in this country, it was legal. Let me say that. Completely legal for a slave woman to be sexually abused and raped.
Yep.
There was no repercussions for
Well,
that.
it was also completely legal to rape your wife. So, you know, a slave, well, who are
was
they?
even less
Right.
then. Yeah.
That's your property.
Countless instances of rape were committed from the late 1700s until the 1860s, destroying mental health and physical health of enslaved women. Psychological terror was also a common tactic used by owners and overseers as a way to maintain order. For example, a slave woman might be threatened with the sale of her child if she did not submit to her owner's sexual advances.
So fucking disgusting.
But he was probably going to sell your fucking kid anyway.
He probably was going to do that
imagine?
anyway. No, I cannot.
Like,
I can't.
Just have Kaylee ripped away from you. As
No.
soon as, you know, you've gone through raising her.
Try it.
And
Try it. See who lives.
because they were
Because
generally
one
like,
of us is dying.
well, they were generally like small children, like 5 years old. Like they wanted to get them through infancy or whatever. And then they were like, okay, bye. I've allowed you to raise your child for like 5 years.
You've
and
had your time.
now I'm taking it from
Yeah.
you. And I'm not telling you where it's going.
I have genuinely thought about this shit for like
Is
my whole
unsettling.
life.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me personally, I'm not gonna speak for them, or I don't want to say what I would do as like a bash at how they handled those situations back
Homicide.
then. It's not, because these people were terrified for their lives. These people were taken from their countries. They didn't even speak the same language. They had no fucking idea.
Could you imagine
Some
they
of
didn't
these-
even understand
No.
completely what was
Was
happening,
happening.
probably initially. I mean, obviously
And
later they did, but
These people that
strip
they
'em down
were
naked and
raping
fucking-
were women, children, genital mutation. That happened as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this is obviously...
anything you can imagine, the most horrible thing you can imagine happened.
It happened. It
Yeah.
happened. And it happened in front of moms. It happened to moms in front of kids.
Yeah.
Like, it happened to moms in front of their husbands. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this shit was disgusting. And it's easy to sit here and say what we all would do, but you don't know until you're in that situation,
Yeah, you're
obviously.
But these poor people were in a situation where
Completely
their entire
different.
race was
Yeah.
suppressed.
Well, and it was
So
a different, what's the word I'm
they were in a different continent even. They were in a different world.
Because they're not going to kill you at that point.
No,
They're
and
going to
the-
fucking make you live, and they're going to torture
They're gonna
you
make
in
your
every
life
fucking
miserable.
way that
Yeah,
they can.
and the resources were not there. Even if they ran away,
No
there
Swift.
wasn't no phone to call someone
Well,
to
who you gonna
ask
call?
for help.
Yeah,
Who you
there
gonna
was
call?
no one to call for help.
There wasn't anyone to go to at a police station for help.
no, because
they would take you right back.
Right back. Yeah.
And they'd probably beat you all the fucking way there, too.
Yeah.
And then to act out in
And
that
death
way,
was a sweet release. Like, they're not going to give
Yeah.
that to you.
Sometimes
They're
it
not
was.
going to give that to
And
you.
they
and there
won't.
were owners that were more lenient and dare I say nice. I still think it's fucking ridiculous,
I mean,
but
it
it does
is.
need to be said that there were owners
There
that
were
turned
owners.
into abolitionists later
Yeah.
that were like taught their slaves to read, and like Tross said earlier, she would like hide it or whatever, and they did the
they
same
did.
thing.
There were people who
There
tried.
were some that did that, but then there were some that were like the worst of the
People
worst.
who
People
took
suck.
full advantage of what they could do.
Yeah,
I mean, the whole situation is just so
Just showed-
fucking like you just
the character of people is
no. You know what's funny is
Hate
like
'em.
that saying.
Hate them.
nah.
Hated
Who are you when no one's around?
Oh my god, yeah.
That,
yeah, exactly.
That
Who are you when
applies.
no one's looking? Yeah.
That applies.
But it was completely socially acceptable to be who you were when nobody was around in public at the
Yeah.
time. So,
and
if it had to do with slaves, you could beat them fucking bloody pulp in the middle of the street and nobody was
Nobody
going to fucking
would
do
say
anything.
anything.
fucked up. That is so fucked up.
but I feel like the people who do stand out are the owners during that time who weren't doing that.
Yeah,
Very
right.
few of them. But there were owners who
They were moving in the shadows,
didn't.
man.
Yeah.
They had to move in the shadows because they couldn't out themselves as a fucking advocate because
No.
then they would also
They'd be a
endure
target.
They'd be
the
a,
same.
they'd put their lives in danger.
Correct.
So that long but very necessary introduction leads me to our main story today.
Am I going to be mad about this too?
You're gonna love this.
All right, let's hear it.
This
I'm
is
excited.
the ray of sunshine in this whole sorry fucking shit that I just read. Ellen Smith was born to a
if
teenage...
that's even your real name.
I know.
Sorry.
She was born to a teenage house slave, Maria, on a plantation in Clinton, Georgia in 1826. Ellen spent her first 11 years on this plantation. She lived her life as any other young house slave at the time, executing daily duties of cleaning, cooking, and watching the owner's children.
I'm surprised they know the year she was born.
Me too, actually, now that you say that. But Ellen was unique. She was unique to the other slaves, and she was treated horribly by the estate's mistress because of it.
Was she beautiful? I'm going with she was beautiful.
Yeah.
Ellen was incredibly light-skinned and was often mistaken to be one of the plantation owner's own children. But the real secret was
She was.
Although history has failed to record the circumstances, Ellen's mother, Maria, was impregnated by her owner, Major James Smith, a lawyer, surveyor, and one of the richest men in central Georgia. He was Ellen's father.
Happened more than you think.
Bearing a strong resemblance to her father, with her light complexion and European features, made life difficult for Ellen in the Smith home. Mrs. Smith found it difficult to look at her, as she was a constant reminder of her husband's infidelity, and with her favorite slave, no less.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, you poor thing, Mrs. Smith.
That's not her real
He
name.
wasn't the only one that he was fucking raping.
I don't know. In 1837, the opportunity arose for Mrs. Smith to be rid of Ellen for good. Eliza, Mrs. Smith's daughter, and
Ooh, I
Ellen's...
like that name.
I do too. So this was Mrs. Smith's daughter and Ellen's white half-sister. She was married away to a man named Robert Collins of Macon, Georgia, and Ellen was sent away to live with the happy couple as a wedding present.
What the fuck?
Can you imagine? She's just like
Go be your sister's
here,
slave.
have this lamp, but it's actually your fucking half-sister, the slave.
Dude.
That's
ridiculous.
like what they did. I can't
Side
even
note.
imagine this. By her own account, Ellen's life in the Collins home was easier than the life of most slaves. She was a trusted lady's maid and was not ill-treated by her mistress sister. She was allowed her own quarters and was taught to sew, a skill that would be a lifelong benefit to her. But she was not taught to read or write because Georgia's law strictly prohibited anyone to teach reading or writing to a slave. Macon, Georgia was a growing town of some 4,000 residents, half white and free and half black and enslaved. Ellen had greater freedom of movement than she would have had on a country plantation.
Did the sister know that they were sisters, maybe?
She did know. Yeah.
Okay, she
Everyone knew. Yeah. The family knew. I don't know that they talked about it in
I'm
society
sure
or whatever.
that a lot
but
of people knew if she was that
she
light-skinned.
looked like,
Yeah.
I have a picture I'll show you guys in a little bit. She looked like her dad.
Okay.
So there was no getting away from it.
Oh, genetics. They
I
always
know.
come to bite
Don't
you in
they?
the ass.
Don't they? So
Beautiful.
Sundays were a free day for Ellen. And as well as, with permission, the holiday week between Christmas and New Year. So she could ask her mistress, sister, or James Collins, which would be the owner, master, whatever, if she could have that week free. And they could either grant it or not. And in those days, they would have had to have a paper that said they could travel.
Right.
And all that stupid fucking shit. But anyway, those were the only times she had any free time. But she was lucky enough to have Sundays free, which wasn't a normal thing for slaves. Macon, Georgia was home to a number of slaves who were trained as skilled artisans. They were allowed to receive money for their work, but were required to give a specified annual sum to their masters. This allowed some clever and hardworking slaves to accumulate some money of their own.
Yes.
Among these slaves
Uh-oh.
in Macon, Georgia, was a talented cabinet maker named William Craft.
Ooh.
Oh, and what a craft he had. He was
Yeah.
a cabinet maker.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was devilishly handsome.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. William is thought to have been born because nobody knows, like Kaylee said earlier. In Georgia in 1824, as a child and teenager, William had seen his family torn apart as his parents and siblings were all sold separately to different owners in various parts of Georgia. William himself was sold off to an owner in Macon at the age of 16 to pay a debt, and this is where he was taught the trade of cabinet making. So,
I mean, at least they taught him something.
they taught him something,
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Fuck all that torture he had to go through beforehand.
Yeah.
So stupid. Sorry, go ahead.
Ellen and William met in the Slave Society in Macon. Ellen's reserved demeanor and obvious intelligence intrigued William, and William's towering, handsome build and charming disposition captured Ellen's attentions. The two quickly hit it off and fell in love.
Aww.
It's so
I love
sweet.
this for them. I got the
I do too.
goosebumps.
I love that. Let me show you a picture of them.
Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah, I want to see.
So this is,
That's her? Or wait,
yep,
that's her?
That's
this
her.
is her.
Oh
And then
my
the other.
God.
She looks like a white lady.
Yeah,
do.
she doesn't look.
She doesn't have that, like, she
got
has
very
a pointed nose
European features.
Yeah.
Tiny, like, Janet lips.
and, yeah.
Janet
does.
chin.
She looked like me.
She kinda.
High cheekbones.
She does
Yeah.
have them cheekbones. Yeah, no, she looks like a white lady.
For sure.
And then he's a handsome classic.
Yeah, he is.
They said he was like really tall, big built.
big man.
Yeah.
Big
He
man.
goes strong, man.
That's right.
He has big cheekbones too.
Yeah, that's them. Ellen was allowed to take William into her cabin, and together with their shared skills, they made a simple home. Yet, as slaves, they could not have a legal or religious marriage. The couple were well aware any children Ellen should bear would, by law, belong to her slave owner. Illiterate but intelligent and high-spirited, the couple dreamed of what life would be like for them if they were free. They fantasized about how many children they might have, where they would live, what their jobs would be, but it was just that, a fantasy, a dream they shared.
That's so.
Or was it?
Dun, dun, dun. Well, her sister's been treating her pretty good so far.
Yeah.
Time to take advantage.
Yeah.
Right?
Faux show, Janet. I'm going to take advantage of your ass.
That's right. In December 1848, the Crafts, surrounded by news of escaped slaves who had made it successfully to the north, had finally had enough dreaming. Together, they devised an incredibly unique plan to escape once and for all to obtain their own freedom.
Victory! I'm here for it.
Flight from Macon, Georgia would require a 1,000-mile journey, though, across slave states. The punishment, should they be caught, would be severe. Jail, whipping, torture, perhaps even the sale to a house of prostitution for Ellen. William later wrote, quote, "The greatest excitement prevails at a slave hunt. The slaveholders and their hired ruffians appear to take more pleasure in this human pursuit than English sportsmen do in chasing a fox or a stag. But the mere idea that we were held as chattels and deprived of all legal rights, the thought that we could not call on the bones and sinews God gave us as our own, but above all, the fact that another man had the power to tear from our cradle the newborn babe and sell it in shambles like a brute, and then scourge us if we dared to lift a finger to save it from such a fate, haunted us for years." End quote.
I mean, for real.
Period.
Because at that point, what would you do if you were pregnant and you knew that it was going to be taken away from you? Would you just fucking, like, what would you do?
I would... What could you do?
You could either unalive yourself or you could unalive the baby and not have it have to fucking go through that. I mean, honestly, it's extreme to think about, but you have to remember the fucking...
It was extreme times,
Yes,
man.
like,
Extreme shit was happening.
Would you, end its suffering before it suffered, or would you, carry on and I mean, it's so, you can't even tell me what you would do, because there's no fucking, we cannot even imagine the shit that these people were going through.
It's fucking devastating. I don't know.
Like, take my fucking baby from my fucking arms. I fucking dare you.
Try it.
Because I'm gonna kill us both right fucking
Yeah.
now. Like,
That is literally how I feel.
I'm gonna fucking, no.
Which is
Yeah.
awful. It was a risk, but it was a risk they were willing to take. Ellen was so light-skinned among strangers they knew that she could easily pass for white, and this would be their ticket out of Georgia.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Ellen would cleverly disguise herself as a young white man in poor health and William would travel with her north as her slave.
Because she couldn't be a woman.
No.
She had to be a man.
She had to be a man.
Yeah. In a few hectic days, the two gathered the clothing Ellen would need. William purchased garments from several white merchants, and Ellen made herself a pair of trousers. That was her sewing skill. Came into play here.
You fucking dumbasses. Teach me how to sew.
No, they were, I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
After begging their masters, they obtained passes that would allow them to be absent from the home during the Christmas holiday, like we talked about earlier. Just how the young couple, they were illiterate and without travel experience, knew what their escape route would be remains a mystery to this day. But what is known is that very early on in the morning of December 21st, the two left Ellen's cabin on different routes to the Macon Railroad Station. So they went
They
separately.
didn't want to be seen
They didn't go together. Yep.
Especially in an area where they were known. Yeah, that makes sense.
There, a delicate-looking young man in trousers, jacket, fashionable French cloak, and a stovepipe hat, face halved mask with green glasses, and right arm in a sling and poultice, bought 2 tickets for Savannah. So I just want to show you
Savannah.
what this lady did here. I got a picture of what she dressed herself up like.
Oh my God.
So this is Ellen before.
Wow.
And this is her as a man, as a slave
She looks
owner.
like a man.
What a clever bitch.
So she covered her face with bandages on the bottom part of her face to kind of cover the femininity
Right.
of her of her chin. So in this picture, it's not covered. Imagine that it is, here.
Right.
So that you can't kind of see those soft
The
corners
even
of her
that,
chin.
though, she just looks like a young guy.
And then the cleverest part of this is that she puts her arm in a sling. And the reason for that is
Breast, right?
possibly part of it.
Covering.
But the reason she did that is because when she's traveling with a slave, you have to sign as the slave owner, and she's illiterate.
Ah.
So now that her hand is in a sling, that's her arm that she writes with, the people will take pity on her and they'll sign for her. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't
Nice.
have to say or sign her
Nice.
name or anything.
I didn't
She
do
killed
anything
killed
wrong.
2 birds with 1 stone.
They
right
thought
there.
of that shit, which I think is so clever.
First of all, I'm incredibly angry that they do not teach this story in school. This is incredible. But second of all, for these slaves to be uneducated, how incredibly intelligent.
Yeah.
That's their drive. That's their fucking fight or
Like-
flight. Like, that's their fucking, they are
They're like,
the
we're going to
prey.
figure it out. We
Yeah.
got to get out of here and we're going to figure out how.
I mean, it just shows you, like, this is the kind of shit about, like, psychology that is so fucking amazing. It's just, like, these people had no resources to even think about or know about what to do in a situation like
Also,
this.
it's really inspiring, like the
Yeah.
will to live and thrive. And it's like,
the will to grow up and to live the way that these two did and to still want to go off and start their own family. That's
but of
incredible.
course they do. Of course they do. They're human.
That's
but they weren't
amazing.
looked at as that. But that's
No.
not. That's the
But-
slave owner's problem and
Yeah.
fault.
Agreed.
But they didn't ever even get to see, like, what a family should look like, what a normal living situation should be.
But they weren't stupid. They knew.
They knew.
Yeah, because it's as it's
this-
instilled in all of us. From even if you when you
like
grow
your
up
would-
and you have a shitty childhood, you know what it should be like.
This is the
Right,
kind of
this
shit,
isn't right.
though,
Yeah.
that I'm saying. This is the kind of shit exactly right here where I say, I don't care how you were raised, unlearn that shit.
Yeah, and it's
Like-
possible.
It is.
Yeah.
Because these people they didn't even know how to read or write. They couldn't even write their own fucking name. Mm-hmm. And they knew how they were being treated wasn't right.
Exactly. So when William takes his place in the train car for black passengers, he was terrified to see his own masters just standing on the
Oh, God.
platform.
But they probably didn't know his fucking face because they didn't fucking recognize, because they're so fucking full of themselves and full of fucking bullshit.
Well, he was on a black passenger train car, so there was probably a bunch of black people on there. So then they were like, "Oh, not looking over there. There's a
Right.
bunch of black people on there."
That's true.
But he was able to hide on that train and not be recognized. And then the train glided down the tracks. But Ellen, in her fine accommodations in the white car, had a greater fright. The passenger who was seated himself right beside her was a close friend of the Collins family who had eaten dinner at their home the night before.
Oh my fucking God.
The young slave master pretended to be deaf to escape having to engage in general conversation, meaning Ellen. She pretended to be deaf, so she couldn't talk to them, which I think is awesome. And he didn't recognize her.
Well, and why would he? Because he knew her as a woman before.
And looked at her as less than, and yeah.
Right, so he probably never really looked at her face.
As the Crafts carried on along their forbidden journey, they came across many challenges. They gave Ellen the name of Young Mr. Johnson, and by putting her arm in a sling, as we talked about earlier, they had hoped to disguise her illiteracy and keep her from having to sign Mr. Johnson's name, and that was a win. They came across many inquisitive fellow passengers who invited Ellen, or Mr. Johnson, to share drinks and cigars and wondered why the peculiar young fellow kept so much to himself.
He's just different.
Yeah.
He's different.
He's
built
just
different.
That's fine.
For different.
Literally. In another instance, a stranger had warned Mr. Johnson against taking his slave boy to the north, as he was sure to attempt to run away.
Tee-hee.
I don't know
LOL.
how.
Joke's on you, motherfucker.
And then later, an aggressive woman traveler mistook William as one of her own runaway slaves.
Uh-oh.
She caused a huge uproar and was screaming that 10 of her own slaves had taken flight after her husband's recent passing. But once again, Ellen and William avoided suspicion. And finally, officials in Baltimore, the last slave port, demanded extensive information for any white man taking a slave to the north. And again, amazingly, Ellen and William evaded capture.
How the fuck?
I don't know. Someone was on their side for real.
Yeah.
For real.
At last, through it all, the Crafts reach Philadelphia, a free city, on Christmas motherfucking morning.
Yes, they did.
Oh
Which
my
I
God.
think
Merry
is
fucking
so
Christmas.
poetic. I'm like,
Wow.
oh my God. Ah!
Love lives here. It's beautiful.
My smile is so big. I couldn't even be.
Bitches.
I was like,
Same. I've been smiling
girl.
the whole time. I'm like,
yeah,
this is
we
awesome.
know they make it. We know they make it. But even in Pennsylvania, there was still dangers lurking. The Fugitive Slave Law of 1793, still enforced, required that escaped slaves that were captured in the North
Be
be
returned,
returned to their slave masters in the South. Yep. So they were still in danger of being caught for that.
I'm in danger.
Ellen, sick and exhausted from the many sleepless nights of such a long, stressful journey, was weary of any white person. She was not trusting at all. She had seen and heard enough from the white train cars and could not believe any white person would be kind. William was more trusting, though. So following the advice of a fellow train passenger, he hailed a cab and gave directions that he was given on that train to a house owned by an abolitionist. There, Ellen shed her disguise finally, and the couple was taken to a farm home of Quakers who sheltered them and taught them to sign their names.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
Word spread quickly within the abolitionist community about the Crafts' miraculous escape, and a man by the name of William Wells Brown paid them a visit. Being a former escaped slave himself, he could relate to the Crafts. Brown became known as America's first black man of letters. He was an accomplished novelist, playwright, historian, songwriter, and at that present time, a lecturer for the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society.
I definitely know him.
He convinced the Crafts to speak at his lectures and tell their story, and they were received sympathetically. Newspaper accounts were published as far away as Macon, Georgia's Telegraph.
Oh, fuck.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Their choice to use and publish their real names did not bring them any harm, though. They left the lecture tour and settled under abolitionist protection in Boston. And Boston wasn't a free city, but it had sectors that were basically protected. So
It's probably like a gang. Like, this
yeah,
is
like
our
boroughs.
fucking,
Yeah, and they were
this
like,
is
stay
our
the fuck
fucking
out.
shit.
Yeah.
You stay the fuck
And
on your
did they
side.
ever even really come and try to get them?
I tell the rest of their story.
Okay.
But life wasn't all they had dreamed it would be. Despite the anti-slavery movement taking place in Boston, it still wasn't a place where black artisan could find employment. Ellen found work as a seamstress, but with one low-level income, the Crafts were not able to support themselves. Things became more uncomfortable for the Crafts with the passing of the 1850 revision to the original fugitive slave law. Under this new law, any white man could say any black man was his runaway slave. Federal marshals and U.S. commissioners were required to obtain the individual and return them to their said quote-unquote master.
Yep.
And all citizens were required to help and aid them. And blacks could not speak for themselves or demand a jury trial. And anyone who helped them would be subjected to imprisonment, including anyone white.
Yep.
Yes.
It got worse before it got better.
Yeah,
Listen, and it's still not even
It's
great.
still not great.
Nope.
But we're miles from. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that either.
It's easy for us to say.
Right.
Yeah.
In 1850, shortly after the new law went into effect, 2 slave hunters arrived in Boston determined to seize William and Ellen and return them to Georgia. Acting fast, William and Ellen were formally married and quickly escaped once again north to Canada.
Iconic.
Canada, oh Canada, oh Canada.
I like it.
Thank you.
I don't know how their song goes, but
I
I'm
have
pretty sure it goes
drank
something like
the
that.
majority of this fucking
Please do.
wine.
Please do. It's delicious. Enduring it prejudice along the way, the couple boarded the SS Cambria as steerage passengers and set sail for England. They reached Liverpool in mid-December. So they're in England now. The newly married fugitive couple were arriving in a country that had freed its own West Indian slaves, and they were abolitionists, but few were actively supporting the anti-slavery movement in the United States. Still, the Crafts were finally able to settle down and begin a peaceful and productive life. They learned to read and write.
Yes.
They bought their first home.
Aw.
They had 5 children.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And in 1860, William published Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom.
Aw.
He sent a copy back to Massachusetts here in the Americas, asking that any revenue generated from the sale of his story that did not go to the anti-slavery movement be sent back to him in England for the education of his children. William, fighting the impulse to return America to fight in the Civil War, I'm sure he had so much mental anguish. I'm sure he was arguing with himself.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't even imagine. Traveled instead to Dahomey on Africa's west coast. So this is a country in Africa. It was actually not referred to as a country, but a kingdom. And he tried to convince the king there to give up the slave trade and cease human sacrifice. They still didn't human sacrifice there at this time.
Oh my God.
He was unsuccessful, but he did manage to bring back 3 slave boys with him to England, who he immediately freed and educated. And he had that they lived with him. With
I was
their
gonna say,
family.
did he raise them as his own?
Yep,
or?
he did.
gosh.
Ellen did too. She's the one that educated them.
Yeah.
In 1864, William took yet another journey to Dahomey and was gifted another 60 slaves
Oh my God.
from the
Wow.
king. The king gave him 60
Because he
slaves.
was probably like, get them the fuck out of
yeah,
here.
maybe. I don't know. He took them all home to England and
Wow.
freed them.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? I think that's so cool.
That's
What do you do? I mean, that's like a huge
That's a humanitarian effort,
but it's
like,
like a
at its
huge
finest.
responsibility too.
Oh,
like,
yeah. How do you get 60 people?
yeah. And
back?
how do you what do you do with them? Like, you can't just be
Yeah,
like,
you
bye.
can't. Yeah,
You
you're
have-
on your way now.
Right.
You barely speak the language.
Right.
Right.
Like, that's a huge responsibility.
But they
wonderful.
did it.
Wonderful.
Back in England, Ellen remained busy with business of her own. She worked with many different organizations that set up aid for freed slaves and black children, while also raising and educating her own and the 3 boys that William had brought home from Dahomey the first time. Ellen also figured out a way to bring her mother, Maria,
Oh my
from
God.
America to live with her and her family in England.
oh my
my
God. This
God.
is
These
like
people are
so
amazing.
sweet.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how the fuck did you even pull that shit off?
I don't know.
This is incredible.
I want my mother
slaves are
right now.
freed at this time, but how does she know where she even is? Like,
Right. And how does she get
And
her
how brave
safe
is she?
And safely.
for being like, I'm over here.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
Give me my mama.
Yeah. Although the Crafts were reasonably successful in England, all the news they were hearing from the United States that slavery was abolished and the Civil War had ended, it gave them hope that they might be able to return to the place they once called home. In 1870, the Crafts packed up and moved back to America,
No, they didn't. Why?
determined to help educate their people. They were determined, though, to help educate their
makes
people
sense. Yep.
and prepare them for the freedom that they just
They
obtained.
were amazing
Yeah.
people, obviously.
They were welcome as celebrities in Massachusetts, but as they moved south to their destination in Georgia, they were shocked to see the once thriving communities impoverished. Great plantations that had been completely destroyed, the Civil War had left areas in devastation. Few blacks prospered, while others either returned to work for their former masters that they were freed from,
Right.
or they roamed the countrysides homeless and unemployed. The Crafts leased a home called Hickory Hill, where they planted crops, and Ellen ran a small school for black children, but after the first year, it was burnt to the ground by the Ku Klux Klan.
Fucking dickheads.
They leased
Get a fucking life.
She's not done, though. Fuck them.
Right.
They lease a second plantation called Woodville just south of Savannah, Georgia. And for 18 long years, the Crafts struggled to build a cooperative farming community and school. Ellen continued to educate black children and black women in the community, and at the same time managed to maintain the only black-owned plantation in the area.
Amazing.
Sometime in 1890, the Crafts moved to South Carolina to live with their daughter. Ellen Craft Crum is her name.
Nice.
A founder of the National Federation of Afro-American Women and wife of Dr. William Crum, a physician. He's a Republican and future U.S. minister to Liberia.
I got the GBs on that
I
one.
know.
I got all goosebumpy.
They're so prominent,
Yeah.
all because of Ellen and William. They wouldn't have had that opportunity.
No.
Ellen Craft died in Charleston sometime in 1891,
1890.
though the exact date is not certain. As she wished, she was buried at Woodville in Georgia soil.
Oh.
And William died later in January of 1900. To this day, William and Ellen Craft are remembered as inspiring symbols of the anti-slavery movement. They are a testament to what people can achieve and overcome even when faced with the most dire of situations. These people were clever, they were intelligent, and they were driven.
And brave.
They pushed back on an entire society that didn't even see them as human beings. And some argue that they didn't really achieve their dream of being successful and completely comfortable, but I think it's poetic that they could not have even imagined the total impact that they would have on generations to come. The Crafts story is one of bravery, determination, and of love. Love for each other and love for their people. And it's American history that deserves to be known and deserves to be told and not forgotten, or else we'll be doomed to repeat it.
Faux show. Mic drop.
Right? So
Yeah.
with all that said, how are you ladies feeling about this story?
I still have the goosebumpies. And you know,
Yeah.
obviously it's heavy and it's whatever, but this specific story that we talked about it's beautiful and I love it.
I love it. I had never heard it before.
No, because I thought I
haven't
had.
either.
I thought I had, but then once you started reading it, I'm like, I don't know this one specifically. And they did so much.
Yeah,
They did
so much.
so much.
They didn't stop at the fact that they miraculously escaped in
wouldn't-
this fucking awesome
Right.
way.
And they would not let that get them down. They wouldn't let anything get them down. And they just kept mustering everything that they had to move forward. And that is
Keep
fucking
going.
amazing.
Yeah.
And it was necessary at that time because if they weren't going to do it, who the fuck was?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
this is the
Those are all the
mentality-
words that like I'm literally going,
I know.
I don't know.
It's amazing.
It's
It takes your breath away to think about.
And
This-
it gives you the goosebumps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gives you the goosebumps.
It's just incredible.
I know.
This story is so emotional.
we needed this.
We did.
At the
Yeah.
A good story,
We
right?
needed this
Yeah.
at the tea
Doesn't
party.
end in death and murder.
Yeah.
I mean, there was plenty
I
of
wish
death and
that
murder in
they-
it, but
Right.
I wish like people like this could live forever, definitely.
too.
But,
stories like this is what inspires generations to be great.
definitely.
And
I
we're
feel
we're
need to
talking
hear
about
this.
them right now.
Yeah.
She died in 1891. We're talking about her over 100 years later.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are.
She-
She never expected that to
No.
happen.
He didn't either.
No.
Like, this story is so fucking beautiful in all of the right ways. And
And this is what we fucking needed.
yes.
This is what I needed.
And also, it's just something that I find to be very
Inspiring.
inspiring, yes, but I think the reason I say it's emotional is not just what they went through, obviously, and why they had to do everything that they did, but the fact that, like, Tracy and I didn't even know this story, that makes me mad because it's like, why aren't we talking about these things? This is a story they should be teaching kids.
No, I agree. I totally,
Why?
and they're not. They're gonna. This is why I think it's important for us here at the Poison Tea Party to talk about things like this, because they are getting rid of this kind of thing. This is American history. This is exactly the sort of American history that white kids, black kids, Latino kids, all Americans need to hear this and know this.
Yeah.
And that's why I decided that I should bring it tonight.
Even though kids should not always listen to the Poison Tea Party.
No, no kids should be listening to this.
But educate your own
Adults can
kids.
tell their kids,
Yes.
and
No.
they should.
But
Educate
why-
your children.
That's our job. That's our job to educate our kids.
Absolutely.
Why in high school isn't this something we talk about in fucking history class? Like, that's ridiculous. This could really impact a lot of fucking people.
Yeah.
I remember history classes were like some of my favorite classes I ever took.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I wasn't the only kid who felt that way.
Right. But, again, kids need to be inspired. And,
Yeah.
the bottom line is, educate your kids.
Please.
Inspire
please.
them, because they're the next generation, man.
And guess what? Guess what? We're just be human
Yes.
and love each other and
just
give each other a chance.
Yep. Empathy. A little bit of empathy goes a long
Yes.
So long.
And not every story you tell has to be sad and depressing. This story right here is a beautiful story that
It's the
would
perfect story.
inspire.
I was a little worried.
No,
let
I
me be
loved
honest. Because we
No.
talk a lot of doom and gloom on this here podcast, and it's a
The
little
reason
bit,
that
it's
we
uplifting.
do is because
But we're here. You know what? It's fucking
we bring
February.
awareness.
It's February.
Yeah.
the season of love.
We need
is.
to support.
And it's Black History
and
Month.
it's Black History
Absolutely.
We
Month.
love
Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black
Happy
History
Black
Month to
History
everybody.
Month.
I hope that you go home and you teach your kids something, and they need to learn some
Please.
things.
Yes.
Educate your kids, even if the world isn't educating. That's what's inspiring about this. You can come from anything. Okay?
Well, that's going to do it for us tonight here on the Poison Tea Party. We'd like to thank you all for listening and hanging out with us and getting your poison on. I hope you all learned something or gained a new perspective. And I know this one was a little different than we're all used to, but
I loved it.
I like
did.
it.
I loved it.
And I like learning new shit, so I hope
And
you all
I'm
did too.
Here for it.
I love you, Ellen and William.
Kaylee's super in her feelings right now.
She is.
I am.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook and head over to the Patreon page at patreon.com/thepoisonteaparty. You choose a tier, become a member, and boom, you'll gain access to bonus content, podcast merch, and you'll be helping support the very best podcast around, and that's
Come
us.
fuck with us.
You're going to help us create more mind-blowing content that we will bring straight back to you. So you see, it's the circle of life, and it starts with you becoming a member.
Yeah.
So get on going over there.
I was gonna
Get
sing
started
the
today.
circle
It's
of
a
life,
circle
but she's
of
gonna
life.
Anyway, and with that, I'm going to need you all to keep it real classy, be kind to each other,
Please fucking do.
and keep those pinkies way up because you've been poisoned.
You've been poisoned, bitches.